think a lot of movies, when they try to make violence funny, they minimize it. This movie does not. Hey everybody, my name is Nick. I'm a director and editor traveling through Okinawa. And today, I'm going to be talking about the film Sonatine. So this film is about a Tokyo Yakuza that is sent to Okinawa by his boss. When a gang war heats up, him and his crew need to lay low on a remote part of the island. The film is a subversion of the Yakuza genre and the gangster film. Gangster movies often glorify violence. They often deify the gangster, show the life to be cool, show what they're doing to be cool, film everything in a very stylized, cool way. This film doesn't do that. This film almost mocks the gangster and takes the position that the life of a gangster or a Yakuza is meaningless and hollow and pretty much devoid of honor. In a way, it's a lot like the film Dust of Angels, which was made in 1992, and I wonder if that was an influence for this film. There is an absurd black humor to this movie that is really fun to watch. Everything the Yakuza do, it's portrayed and shot as something that's very silly. You know, you put these stoic, kind of grumpy men in these childish situations, and it really highlights their childlike nature, kind of the stunted maturity of the gangster, the childish, immature nature of leading a criminal life. There's something very funny, but also very poignant about the imagery of a Yakuza arriving in Okinawa and being offered ice cream to eat, and then sitting in a car with a bunch of his buddies eating a popsicle, waiting to go to war. The comedy is very subtle, but it's very funny if you get into the wavelength of this film. The violence is pretty absurd too. One example is like a guy getting beaten up and left on the bathroom floor in front of the stall, and then somebody's stuck in the stall and can't open the door. It's just very silly, just showing kind of the goofiness of this kind of violence, but also showing how horrible it is. I think it strikes a really good balance of making the violence funny without minimizing the dangerous nature of it. I think it's one of the best movies for that. I think a lot of movies, when they try to make violence funny, they minimize it. This movie does not. In fact, the humorous aspect of it really show you how silly and horrible violence is. I think there's a lot to go into about what this movie is saying about violence. Whenever people are killed, the editing cuts abruptly into people being shot. And when they shoot, they just stand and shoot at each other. They don't try to move out of the way. I feel like the people that are involved in the violence are almost disassociating. And it really shows how the characters and the people that lead this life, how the violence affects them and affects their mental health. The way that the violence is cut and the way that the violence is staged really does something important, which it doesn't allow the audience to enjoy or feel cathartic with the violence. This is another reason this movie is subverting the Yakuza genre. You know, I think a lot of movies that are gangster movies play the violence as something cool, something to emulate, something that we, the audience, get a release from. This movie almost, the violence abruptly starts, it happens, the people don't try very hard, they just shoot each other, and then they're all dead. Characters that you were with are then all of a sudden gone from the movie. And it just really, I think, is more realistic about what that experience would be like, where you have a bunch of friends, sometimes they get shot, and then they're gone. And the people involved are just kind of dead into it. They just stand there blankly shooting at each other. You know, this brings me to discuss the acting. You know, the acting is very deadpan. The gangsters are very calm. There's a little bit of screaming, but there's not as much as you would see in a lot of these Taiwanese gangster films. People are just like yelling at each other all the time. Or even, you know, Scorsese movies where it's always like, fuck this, fuck that. There's none of that. There's not so much of that. Mostly the people are very stoic and standing there and kind of just engaging in this. One of my favorite things about this movie is it really shows like how to do deadpan acting well. In the main actor, behind his blank face, we see these moments of happiness really start to seep through. So it's not just that he's expressionless and has no feeling. There's something behind his feelings of sadness that are really interesting to watch. We can see it erode slowly throughout the film, and we see the happiness seep through as he is living alone, living with his friends in solitude in Okinawa on the beach, and allowing his inner child to come out. We see that expressionlessness seep away, and we see these smiles come through. These games kind of go back to the violence again, though. They have violent undertones where they play games like Russian roulette, or when they're shooting fireworks at each other, he brings a gun out, or he's like digging holes for people to fall into and kind of a lot of his pranks have a very violent undertone, kind of highlighting the fact that even in his play, he cannot escape violence. That is his life, that's all he knows. The reality seeps in that violence is his existence and he can't escape it. You know, that happiness again melts away back into emptiness, and we get an even deeper emptiness than we had before, which is just a real brilliant thing to watch. I think this movie is the perfect film to watch if you really want to understand how to do deadpan, very stoic acting well. Because I think the important thing to think about is that you need to have layers behind that emptiness. It can't just be that you're blank. People can be stoic and silent, but there needs to be something inner inside of us. And even if we don't exactly see that, we need to feel that that's there. And I think in this movie, especially with the main actor, he really does have that depth to him. And when you watch him, you definitely feel like his emptiness is real and concealing a deep sadness and fear. You know, there's a lot going on with him, and it's highlighted by a lot of the profound lines that he has. So the girlfriend that he has, or the girl that he meets on Okinawa, says, "You're tough. I love tough guys." And he would say, "I wouldn't carry a gun if I were tough. So you can shoot without a second thought. I shoot fast because I get scared fast. But you're not afraid of dying, are you? When you're scared all the time, you reach a point where you wish you were dead." I mean, these kind of lines are so delivered so well, and they really get to the core of what this film is all about. Basically, that a tough guy gangster isn't really a tough guy. He's a kid. Editing of this movie is fantastic. You know, it happens in little snippets, and it feels really interesting because the scenes almost feel incomplete, but it's definitely very purposeful. I think the reason for the editing being this way, where scenes kind of feel as though they start in the middle and end before they're done, really shows the kind of disassociating nature of the characters and how they're not really present in their life. They're kind of sleepwalking through their whole existence. So it's just great to see this kind of interesting stylistic editing that mimics the feelings of the people in the film. Beyond the editing, I think the real technically impressive thing to note in this film and to pay attention to as a filmmaker or a film lover is the score. The score is done by Joe, let me look at how to pronounce it exactly. Hisaishi, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Done by this guy, Joe, who does the Ghibli scores. He is just one of the most talented composers working. I mean, the music really sets the mood. It's very dreamy and childlike again, back to that. But there's also a very dissonant, experimental quality to it. He does a lot of really cool stuff. So he does the Ghibli kind of classic thing that you would expect. You hear the kind of Ghibli-esque music, but there's also really interesting things he does with sound design, where like the wind or the sound of a car will like morph into this dissonant drone, this kind of very haunting sound, very experimental. And then he will also utilize Okinawan music. Okinawa has a really important and interesting musical tradition, so I think the fact that it's filmed on Okinawa, you definitely have to utilize this. So, you know, he does a lot with the score. I think that is one of the main things to pay attention to when watching this movie. You know, the thing that I just love about this movie is just the experimental, interesting nature of it. The way that the music will become dissonant. There's a couple scenes like the sumo scene on the beach, which just all of a sudden becomes very odd and interesting. And I just love that this director, Beat Takeshi, he's making a gangster film, but he's not afraid to play and do weird stuff with his film and really try to make something beyond a standard gangster film. I think it's just a great exploration of what cinema can do. I think this movie is a must-watch for sure, especially people who seen a lot of gangster films and love a lot of gangster films. I think this will expand your mind to the possibility of what a gangster film can be, and it will also kind of highlight some of the dangerousness in the traditional gangster film and really make you think about violence in a way that maybe you haven't before. So, high recommended this film. I love this film. I think Beat Takeshi is an amazing director. He's a great actor too. I loved him in Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. So I was really excited when I saw him in this film. I didn't know that he was a director. Yeah, definitely check this one out. Let me know what you think of this film in the comments below. And let me know what movie I should review next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Remember to comment, share, subscribe.